Hello everyone, I'm back for another update here. Today is the last day of February 2026. Last day of meteorological winter. And I am in a different place that I haven't been to. It's called the Rich Hole Wilderness. And the trail goes up to the top of the ridge line and follows the top of the, well, not the top, but just below, in a westerly direction from the parking area. So yeah, I'm up near the top of the ridge. The top of the ridge line is right there. And it kind of goes over and then starts back down. I went up the trail a couple miles beyond here and it's pretty overgrown spots, but not too bad. And this is where the trail comes over the top of the ridge and starts back down toward the parking area. And I think the best views, at least the part of the trail I was on, is just up ahead here where you start back down. As you can see, suddenly the views open up as soon as you crest this high point here. And there's a view looking east. Toward the crest of the Blue Ridge, where the Blue Ridge Parkway runs along those mountains in the distance. And this trail starts to descend from here to the road and the parking area off the ridge. So what I'm going to cover today is a continuation of yesterday's discussion about our upcoming climate and how it differs so much from what we keep hearing on mainstream media about climate warming and 1.5 C above normal, and globally, temperature-wise, when in actuality the climate's on the verge of going in the other direction. Already has been since 2007, but once we descend into the next minimum of the cycle, we're really going to start feeling the effects of a different solar regime than we've had in the last nearly century of higher solar activity. Came to an end in around after cycle 23 ended. The sun began a new regime of lower activity, leading to a change from global warming to global cooling around 2007. That's when they started to have to lie and make up excuses for the increased snowfalls and increased cold outbreaks we began seeing from that point. And from 2007 on, the snowfall, big snows became more frequent. From 2007 on, and they began making up voodoo explanations. I call them voodoo because it's a true 1.5°C increase in global temperatures would lead to a totally different climate than we're seeing today. Arctic ice would be gone. Greenland would be much more livable than it is now. Parts of Antarctica would, even the peninsula would mitigate considerably, which is not happening. So we know the latest reports from Greenland, near record low temperatures of 86 below, I think they got down to in Greenland. And the record was 91 below, set back in 1991, which was after Pinatubo erupted 6 months earlier, which kind of knocked down the global temperatures for couple of years. And the reason why that eruption knocked down global temperatures is because it put up a huge cloud in the upper atmosphere, blocked sunlight. And for a couple of years after that eruption, global temperatures dropped. And that gives a clue as to what's coming in the future, beginning stages of this next minimum. It's going to get worse, very likely, even than that. We saw the blizzard of 93 in May of 1992. Asheville, North Carolina picked up, not Asheville, but just in the higher elevations around Asheville, picked up feet of snow in May of 1992. I'll never forget that. I was living in that area, and they closed the Blue Ridge Parkway down, and the snow remained on the peaks until well into June 1992 around Asheville. And that's what's going to start happening, more events like that. And of course, they're going to, again, try to blame it on global warming. Increased moisture in the atmosphere excuse is going to come up, or Arctic amplification. They'll say the Arctic is warming. That's why this is all happening, and all nonsensical explanations for what really the symptoms of global cooling. Because of true global warming, as I've been saying repeatedly, the jet stream takes a more zonal path around the entire planet. Less wiggles, less storminess, further north track of the jet stream in general. And that's what prevailed during much of the 20th century. During the hot periods of higher solar activity, we had a three-wave pattern in the jet stream prevail most of the time. Once in a while, during solar minimums, it would get wavy enough to get an occasional bigger snowstorm, or, but big snowstorms during the 20th century, for most of the 20th century, were relatively rare events. But then around 2007, things began to change. We started getting big snowstorms every winter. And that didn't fit the narrative. So they had to come up with excuses and explanations to keep the narrative going. And not admitting that perhaps the trend in climate was starting to change toward a cooling regime coming out of a warming regime. Of course, the Tonga eruption in January of 2022, the reason why that again warmed the planet is, and temporarily held back the cooling trend for a couple of years, is because it put up a lot of water vapor in the upper atmosphere. It was an underwater eruption. It blew tremendous amounts of water vapor up into the higher levels of the atmosphere, creating a blanket over the Earth, warming it. And that is a good part of the explanation as to why winters of the last few years were as mild as they were. That combined with MJO manipulation, and I'm the only person that brings out that it's even possible to manipulate the MJO, and that it isn't just randomly happening in the warmer phases all the time, or most of the time. I looked today at the MJO, it's pretty obvious they're trying to, now that we're getting into March, they're trying to get the MJO more into a phase 6 influence, which would be perfect for severe weather outbreaks because it puts warm air in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. and cold air in the western, with a trough in the western U.S. The two clash, you get severe weather. They want the MJO into phase 6 because they want an active severe weather season to fulfill their narrative. Which in true global warming it wouldn't really be the case. You'd get less severe weather because you'd have less cold air clashing with the warm air coming up. You have to have cold air clashing to get severe weather. Without that cold air, you're not going to get severe weather. True global warming would bring a very benign pattern, weather-wise, a lot less stormy. The biggest positive anomalies in the U.S. would be around North Dakota, not down in the southern part of the country, or one side of the country is warm, the other side is cold type thing. And true global warming, the biggest positive anomalies would be over the center of the continent, over North America, South Central Canada. That's where you get the biggest positive anomalies in temperature. Pretty much everybody in the country simultaneously would be above average in that scenario. I've seen it happen some winters, especially winter time. The summer would be really hot under that subtropical high pressure, which would be further north. You'd get hotter summers, like what happened in the 30s. So I'm coming down into this gap, and then the trail heads down that way towards the parking area and comes off the ridgeline from this gap right here, goes to the right. I looked today at the strength of the high pressure. That high pressure appears to be starting to weaken a bit down over, it's now located over southern Mexico. It's still one of the strongest areas of high pressure on the globe right now. You got another one out in the eastern Atlantic off Africa. Of course, that could be by design too, to try to get the water temperatures up there for the hurricane season this year. I can't say whether for sure whether that's by design or not, but it may be. But why is that high pressure over southern Mexico and that region so strong? It's MJO manipulation. All the warm air is being pulled up in that one spot on the globe from having the MJO constantly in the warmer phases. It creates a huge high pressure ridge that they were hoping, as I touched on last video yesterday, they were hoping this ridge would encompass most of the U.S. and bring record warm temperatures and a winterless season, which did happen out west, but did not happen out east, because man can't totally regulate the weather. They can enhance things, try to enhance patterns that perhaps may already be in place, or control the path of the jet stream to make some places deceptively appear warm, where the population lives, where most people live. For example, right now we have a trough over the Dateline area of the Pacific. Again, that trough reinvigorated itself, and if that trough were over the U.S., the entire U.S. would be having cold weather, near record cold temperatures, and unbelievable amount of storminess. But this trough is out over the Pacific where nobody lives, northwest of Hawaii. It's the center of it in the date line, but the width of the trough would encompass the whole U.S. if it was positioned further east than it is. So what happens in that scenario? You get a big, huge ridge that builds up to the east of that trough and siphons warm air up into the U.S. And the problem is they've been having trouble getting the ridge to cover the whole U.S. because we're not in a solar max anymore. The flow isn't as zonal, and the pattern is more meridional than it was. Plus, again, the Tonga eruption and the effects of that are fading off as well. It's making it harder for them to bring a record-breaking warm weather to the entire U.S. at once. But it's not an accident that the strongest ridge on the planet is sitting over southern Mexico. I mean, there is another one in the southern hemisphere, down off South America, but it's summertime down there. You would expect the ridge down there to be pretty strong. It's we're at the end of summer now for them. But to have one over Mexico, late winter, early spring like that, there's a little more to it. It hasn't randomly happened. I mean, I have eaten bananas that are rotted on the inside, and that happens when they're sitting in very hot temperatures to be shipped or on the dock, and it's very hot. Bananas on the inside will rot slightly. And I say to myself, yep, it's because of that high pressure system over Central America. It's bringing hot temperatures to that region in the middle of winter. And they were hoping, again, that ridge was going to extend up into the U.S. and that we'd be in the 70s all winter. Most of the country, that's what they were hoping was going to happen. And they did get their wish out west. Albuquerque had the warmest winter on record by a long shot. Salt Lake City had the warmest meteorological winter on record. Denver, Colorado has had 40 days above 60 degrees this season, from December 1st till March 1st. They really haven't had a winter out there this year. Again, it's by design. This did not happen naturally. They altered the pattern by manipulating that MJO. They were hoping that the ridge would cover more of the U.S. than it did. Because I've seen convection in the warmer phases all winter going on. Apparently they couldn't quite get it in the phase 6 zone enough to extend the ridge to bring the whole... I got people coming behind me. So I'll end this.